J'ouvre maintenant la...
I will now call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 15 of the House of Commons Standing Transport Infrastructure and Communities Committee, pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, January 31st, 2022. The committee is meeting to study the state of Canada's supply chain. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of November 25th, 2021. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. As per the directive of the Board of Internal Economy on March 10th, 2022, all those attending the meeting in person must wear a mask except for members who are at their place during proceedings.
A moment to make a few comments for the benefit of our members and our witnesses. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom, you have a choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can, and we appreciate your patience and understanding in this regard. Members appearing before committee today, we have from the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association, Brian Kingston, President and Chief Executive Officer. From General Motors of Canada Limited, we have Mr. David W. Patterson, Vice President, Corporate and Environmental Affairs. From Global Automakers of Canada, we have Mr. David Adams, President and Chief Executive Officer. From Lion Electric, we have Mr. Patrick Gervais, Vice President, Marketing and Communications. From the Prince Rupert Port Authority, we have Mr. Ken Veldman, Vice President, Public Affairs and Sustainability. From Cisco Canada, we have Randy White, President. Welcome back, Mr. White. From the Vancouver Fraser Port Authority, we have Mr. Greg Roge, Director, Land Operations, and Mr. David Miller, who's appearing in person today, Senior Advisor to the Executive Director. We wish to now begin the opening remarks with the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association for 5 minutes. The floor is now yours.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair, honorable members. Thank you for the invitation to appear here today as part of the committee's important study about the state of Canada's supply chain. The Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association is the industry association representing Canada's leading manufacturers of light and heavy-duty motor vehicles. Our membership includes Ford Motor Company of Canada, General Motors of Canada Company, and Stellantis, FCA Canada. Canada's automotive industry is responsible for over $13 billion in annual economic activity, 117,000 direct jobs, and an additional 371,000 jobs in aftermarket services and dealership networks in 2020. The industry is Canada's second largest export sector with $36.5 billion in exports in 2021. CVMA members are leading a new wave of auto investment in Canada. Over the past 2 years, Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis have announced $11.5 billion in investment, which will create over 6,000 direct jobs and tens of thousands throughout the auto supply chain. The majority of this new investment is dedicated to electric vehicle assembly and the battery supply chain. Canada's domestic auto industry is competitive as part of a highly integrated North American market. Every day, vehicles, parts, and components are shipped across the continent as part of the assembly process. To make this happen, companies invest millions in complex logistical plans that rely on scheduled, uninterrupted delivery to and from the plants. Any delay can impact production and potentially shut down a line, costing millions of dollars and putting jobs at risk. Supply chain challenges continue to be a major headwind facing the industry, slowing a return to pre-COVID North American production and sales levels. First quarter vehicle sales are down 12.7% from last year, and North American auto production is expected to reach 15.2 million units in 2022, which is 1 million units short of pre-COVID production. These supply chain challenges are driven by semiconductor shortages, COVID outbreaks, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and the recent blockade of the Ambassador Bridge, to name a few. While some of these challenges are outside of Canada's control, the blockade of the Ambassador Bridge exposed weaknesses in our trade infrastructure that should be addressed to make the supply chain more resilient. The Ambassador Bridge blockade closed a critical commercial border crossing responsible for approximately 1/3 of all Canada-US trade. There are almost 7,000 trucks crossing each day, and a significant portion of that is tied to the auto industry. Due to the blockades, automotive companies on both sides of the border undertook extraordinary measures and cost burden to deal with a sudden trade diversion, and some plants were forced to cease production. Company contingency planning efforts were impacted by a lack of communication and coordination between local, provincial, and federal levels of government. Companies were challenged to find an appropriate point of contact that could provide oversight and direction to support decision making. In the absence of a clear response plan, CVMA had to take the extraordinary step of supporting an injunction against the protesters. The injunction was successful and ultimately led to enforcement action to clear the blockade. So Canada needs to do more to support a safe and reliable trade infrastructure to make the supply chain more resilient as part of the integrated North American auto market. Failing to act now could impact our competitiveness for existing and future investment. So with that, we recommend 5 things for your consideration today. Number 1, identify a clear federal lead to provide guidance and direction when there is any threat to cross-border movement of commercial goods. This person or entity should have the authority to coordinate with other levels of government and counterparts in the US to ensure decisions are made quickly and disruptions are dealt with swiftly. Number 2, reinforce efforts to complete the Gordie Howe Bridge and access by construction of direct access from Ontario Highway 401 to prevent future disturbances. Number 3, increase border service agent staffing to ensure all lanes are consistently open at high volume ports of entry. This should be accompanied by investments in training opportunities for border staff to support improved consistency and interpretation of bulletins or regulatory changes. Number 4, enhance marine port infrastructure to facilitate vehicle loading and unloading to support the supply chain and ensure our domestic industry can reap the benefits from Canada's trade agreements. And lastly, number 5, ensure that any new customs administrative processes introduced take into consideration lead times necessary to make complex custom system updates and mitigate any undue cost increases or administrative burden to businesses that would impact competitiveness. Thank you so much for your time today, and I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Very much, Mr. Kingston. Next, from General Motors of Canada Limited, we have Mr. Patterson. Mr. Patterson, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the invitation to speak with the committee and for your interest in our story at General Motors Canada. As you may be aware, GM is making large investments in Canada with the reopening of our Oshawa plant, the transformation of our plant in Ingersoll, Ontario, to be Canada's first full-scale electric vehicle manufacturing operation starting later this year. We've grown now to more than 1,000 engineers doing R&D, software and technology testing in Canada. And significantly recently, we announced a $500 million investment in Quebec with a joint venture partner, and we will build a factory to process cathode active materials from critical minerals needed for General Motors' Ultium EV battery supply chain in North America. At GM, we not only depend on well-functioning supply chains, we are often the purchasing customer at the top of the chain. So as you study supply chains, it's often useful to follow the money. At GM, our supply chains are much more than containers moving parts to our factories on boats, trains, and trucks. In the auto sector, supply chains are global. Our supply chains have not only been disrupted by COVID, pandemics, wars, the effects of climate change, sanctions, and disruptions at the Canadian border. As Brian has mentioned, they've also been impacted by the new CUSMA agreement, or USMCA, by other regulatory changes, and by changing technology. The wider shift from a goods-based economy to a digital or intangibles economy also has important impacts that policymakers need to understand. I'd like to just offer a few initial thoughts. First, it may be human nature to focus on the problems in supply chains. I think, however, that the disruptions that we've faced in the past few years are actually far less remarkable than the supply chain solutions that have been found to keep things moving. Supply chains are about infrastructure, logistics, and technology, but mostly they are about people solving problems. For example, when the pandemic hit, General Motors was able to quickly leverage our expertise and our supply chain partners to quickly make ventilators at scale to save lives. And here in Canada, we quickly secured a medical manufacturing license at the Oshawa Auto Plant, and made 10 million medical masks for first responders across Canada. When semiconductor chips were scarce or when bridges were blocked at the border in Windsor, the solutions to keep our factories working were frankly remarkable. My point is that there is amazing capability and resilience in our supply chains and the people that run them. And if we work together with the private sector to learn, prepare, and adjust, we can remain competitive. A second thing I encourage you to consider is that supply chains are changing as our products and services change. General Motors is rapidly shifting to electric vehicles and self-driving vehicles. And this has led us to re-examine our traditional supply chain approaches to now take a much more integrated, hands-on approach, including new partners and investments. Part of our electric vehicle strategy has been to own our own battery technology. It's branded Ultium, as we innovate to reduce costs and benefit our customers. As we ramp up to make millions of electric vehicle batteries, we want to be purposeful in building a sustainable EV supply chain in North America, including critical minerals processing and battery systems development. This presents a generational opportunity for Canada with its distinct abundance of key minerals and our very good fortune since the 1960s to have our auto sector fully integrated into the North American market. As the new EV market grows, we in Canada have the opportunity to not only mine and move critical minerals, we should also process them. We should recycle them and purposely develop the technology and the intellectual property all around them. So we're no longer Harold Innis's hewers of wood and drawers of water. As I noted, we're very excited to be back manufacturing in Quebec, where we plan to begin processing materials for EV batteries by the start of 2025. And in this regard, we welcome the budget's $3.8 billion critical minerals plan. Now the challenge will be to think carefully, not just about how to best spend that money, we must also follow the money and the market. If Canada and the United States are to be the best of integrated EV supply chain partners, we will need to align our approaches to regulation and supply chain resilience. Supply chains, therefore, are not just a challenge, they're a generational economic and environmental opportunity, but we will need to get the policy framework right. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Patterson. Next, from Global Automakers of Canada, we have Mr. Adams. Mr. Adams, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the 15 members of the Global Automakers of Canada, I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today. Our members include Canada's largest automaker, Toyota, who last year produced more vehicles than Ford, GM, and Stellantis combined, and Honda, Canada's second largest automaker, in addition to 13 exclusive Canadian distributors of their brands in our country. Last year, our members represented 62% of all vehicle sales in Canada and 65% of all light-duty vehicle production in Canada. While our members have traditionally been characterized as importers, approximately 56% of the vehicles that are sold by our members in Canada are produced in the traditional CUSMA USMCA region. As a result of the composition of our membership and where they produce vehicles and ship from, they have significant experience with supply chain infrastructure by truck and rail running both north and south in the NAFTA region, east and west across Canada, and with the port authorities on the East Coast and the West Coast, as well as the Port of Montreal. Suffice it to say that there have always been longstanding infrastructure issues within Canada that need to be continually monitored, addressed, and modernized if, as a trading nation, we wish to continue to create a hospitable environment for foreign direct investment in our country. Substantive efforts at a federal and provincial levels to attract investments to Canada can be undermined by infrastructure that is both congested and at times lacks the reliability and predictability that investors seek to ensure that they can secure the necessary production inputs into their facilities, as well as getting finished goods to market. I think it is important for the committee to note that perhaps like other industries, Canada's supply chain infrastructure issues may be somewhat masked by the impact of the pandemic over the course of the past couple of years. For instance, automobile production in Canada fell 28% in 2020 from 2019 levels, and 2021 production was down fully 33.5% from 2019 levels. Likewise, vehicle sales in Canada fell 20% in 2020 from 2019 levels, and we're still down 14% last year from 2019 levels. The automotive manufacturers in Canada export roughly 85% of what is built here, and conversely, Canada imports about 85% of what is sold here. These substantially lower shipping volumes over the past 2 years suggest that existing challenges will be amplified as both production and sales volumes return to more traditional levels. The return to more traditional levels of both production and sales is expected to happen at a very modest pace, however, owing to the ongoing shortage of semiconductor chips, which has resulted in lost vehicle production globally of about 12 million units. This lack of vehicle production has resulted in low inventories of new vehicles for the past 2 years, which has had the secondary impact of higher prices for new vehicles and subsequently for used vehicles as well. Increasingly, our supply chain challenges are not simply related to things like port congestion or rail strikes, but can also be tied to the challenges around our changing climate, where fires and flooding compromise or destroy key pieces of rail, road, and port infrastructure that is not often quickly nor easily rebuilt. Our members have also been working with their supply chain partners to ensure the higher throughput of electric vehicles at port facilities through the installation of charging stations and other modifications, as well as rail cars equipped to transport these vehicles. In this regard, as our industry transitions to zero-emission vehicles, we were pleased to see the announcement of the Clean Growth Fund in last month's federal budget, with a commitment to restructuring critical supply chains, as well as $1.5 billion allocated under the Critical Minerals Strategy for infrastructure to support the development of a critical mineral supply chain, which will be essential to maximizing Canada's resources and opportunities to become a critical component globally of materials and minerals necessary for the development of electrified vehicles. I wish to thank the committee again for the opportunity to appear before you today, and I would be pleased to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adams. Prochainement, nous avons Mr. Patrick.
And now we will hear from Mr. Patrick Gervais from Lion Electric.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and the committee. Maybe, as you know, Lion Electric is the leader in electrification of transportation. We're an OEM, and we built medium and heavy-duty all-electric truck and buses. Every day we help make Canada one of the cleanest economy in the world, and help the country reduce its green gas emission. Of course, financial incentives and strong policies are essential when we want to develop a new sector such as the electrification of transportation, just as it is necessary to be ambitious to achieve our objectives. But all this will not have a real local economic impact if our businesses are at disadvantage compared to our American, Asian, or European neighbors. And no need to tell you, the competition is fierce to the Canadian flagships. We believe that it is essential to advocate for the creation of a strong Canadian supply chain in the electrification of transport, but all other manufacturing activity. From a complete ecosystem, from natural resources to the production of finished product, all the way to recycling. And all this needs to include local purchases. We as Canadians have always distinguished ourselves with innovation. A strong Canadian supply chain will continue developing our cutting-edge expertise that will serve generations to come, and the creation of really well-paid jobs. We're asking to develop regulations that requires assembly in Canada and RFPs, financial assistance programs. This is currently what every country in the world is doing by developing policies to encourage the local economy. It is quite normal for governments to encourage their domestic businesses and the creation of jobs in their territory, especially when it comes to the development of a whole new economy like electrification of transportation. We need to abolish the lowest bidders policy. Lowest bidder, it's an innovation killer. Without a strong signal from the Government of Canada on assembly in Canada, local companies will find themselves at a competitive disadvantage compared to foreign companies. Also, we have seen the impact of the pandemic. It is important as a country that we become more independent and that we become more integrated vertically. Electrification of transportation alone has a major effect on creation of a new growing green economy. Through innovative public policies, the Canadian market for zero-emission vehicle could grow from a value of 1 billion GDP and the creation of 10,000 jobs in 2015 to a value of more of 150 billion GDP and the creation of millions of jobs by 2040. These changes will improve our energy security and positively impact the return on investments that electric fleets will experience through less maintenance, longer life cycle, and lower maintenance cost. Building our supply chain is also a solution to fight climate change. Transportation is one of the biggest GHG emitters, and working with local company means less transportation and less GHG emission. Let's put the odds on our side and start building a strong Canadian supply chain because we are already behind. Thank you, and I'll be happy to answer any of your questions.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Next, from the Prince Rupert Port Authority, we have Mr. Ken Veldman. And Mr. Veldman, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Good morning from the traditional territory of the Tsimshian people on the north coast of British Columbia. Many as you will know, the Prince Rupert Port Authority is responsible for the overall planning, development, marketing, and management of commercial port facilities within the Port of Prince Rupert. Proudly Canada's third largest port and growing. We currently have over $2 billion in our advanced project portfolio, either under construction or nearing the end of environmental assessments and final investment decisions. The Prince Rupert Gateway is a strategic trade corridor for Canada, and it continues to facilitate critical international market access for Western Canadian exports and ensuring the direct connection for consumer imports destined throughout Canada and the United States. Currently, the port facilitates these exports and imports through 6 primary terminals that provide intermodal dry bulk and liquid bulk capacities and handle diverse commodities, including consumer goods, manufacturing inputs, biorenewable and transitional energy, forestry, petrochemical, and agricultural goods, to name just a few. Building upon the natural advantages of Prince Rupert, including it being the closest West Coast port to Indo-Pacific markets, the port has continued to grow and diversify our cargo volumes, unlock private sector investments in new infrastructure capacity, and add value to Canadian trade. The port has handled approximately $60 billion in trade value annually and supports over 6,000 gateway operation jobs throughout northern BC, resulting in over $500 million in annual wages and $145 million in annual government revenue contributions. Our growth and success have been thanks to our strong relationships and collaboration with local community and Indigenous partners. Local Indigenous residents, Indigenous governments, and Indigenous-owned businesses have participated significantly in the economic opportunities presented by growth and expansion of the Prince Rupert Gateway. Our long-term sustainable growth is directly correlated to the continued collaboration and participation of our Indigenous partners. We've witnessed major climate change events impacting communities and domestic supply chains in southern BC, the ongoing impacts of COVID, supply chain and market disruptions, and global conflict. As disruptions will continue to occur, we need to ensure that Canada has reliable and resilient supply chains to ensure the free movement of Canadian exports, so communities across the country can better manage economic and social challenges that flow from those disruptions. To build greater resiliency, we must work to have greater redundancy in our West Coast supply chains, ensuring that both major gateways, Prince Rupert and Vancouver, can provide Canada with enhanced trade capacity and logistics capabilities as disruptions occur. The recent global conflict in Ukraine has highlighted Canada's need to support global partners. As Indo-Pacific and Western European nations are looking globally for new sources of energy, Canada needs to expand energy export capacity to provide our global partners with access to clean, responsible Canadian energy. Prince Rupert's connectivity to Western Canadian energy production centers and ongoing support for low-carbon energy trade to those markets make Prince Rupert a logical focus for growth of critical energy export infrastructure. As the committee undertakes this important work on ensuring the strengthening of our supply chain capacity and resiliency, I want to leave you with these recommendations. 1, we need to ensure we are developing not just new terminal capacity, but just as importantly, logistics and transloading capabilities that provide more value, competitiveness, and flexibility for Canadian trade. In Prince Rupert, this is a strategic focus for us, and we have been working to finalize major export and import transloading services through the Ridley Island Export Logistics Project. Number two, to support the international market transition to renewable energy and provide global partners with access to Canadian energy, a focus on enhancing export capacity is necessary for achieving this. Prince Rupert has become a leader in energy transition thanks to the development of Canada's only West Coast LPG export terminals, and we're looking to expand on this success with the development of the Vopak Pacific Canada terminal. Three, to meet Canada's current and future supply chain demands, we do need to have more transparent and efficient regulatory processes that ensure appropriate and timely decisions are made on vital trade infrastructure. Delays in regulatory processes have hindered the development of port projects that would have provided much needed supply chain relief. And to be clear, we're not advocating for any less robust review, but more timely, more certain, more transparent processes. Thank you once again for the invitation to appear today to discuss the important role that the Port of Prince Rupert continues to have on Canada's supply chain and trade agenda. I do look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Veldman. Next, from the Vancouver Fraser Port Authority, we have Mr. Greg Raj and Mr. David Miller. Gentlemen, you have the floor, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is David Miller. I'm Senior Advisor to the Executive at the Vancouver Fraser Port Authority, and I'm joined from Vancouver by my colleague, Greg Roge, Director of Land Operations. It's our pleasure to be here today to provide the Port Authority's perspective to your review of issues facing Canada's supply chains. As a Canada Port Authority, we're federally mandated to enable trade through the Port of Vancouver while protecting the environment and considering local communities. The Port of Vancouver is Canada's largest and most diversified port. We're about equal in size to the next 5 largest ports combined. The port handles the most diversified mix of cargo of all North American ports. In 2021, despite the ongoing pandemic and global supply chain challenges, as well as the extreme weather events in BC, cargo volumes through the port increased by 1% over the previous year. 2021 saw record container volumes for the 5th consecutive year, and despite the severe drought on the prairies, record volumes in the first half of the year meant we still had the second highest volume of grain exports in history. While we continue to deal with challenges and unpredictability across the supply chain, the port is operating efficiently, and we've been able to weather the storm better than many ports around the world. After a 2-year absence, we were also very pleased that in April, we were able to welcome cruise ships back to the port. Our port has been a major beneficiary of the National Trade Corridors Fund and its predecessor programs. By working together with our customers, the terminal operators, railways, trucking companies, municipalities, and Indigenous groups, we've been able to set priorities and access significant funding to address bottlenecks, improving the capacity, efficiency, and safety of our supply chains. The government funds have unlocked billions more in private sector investment in new and existing terminals and rail and highway corridors. The past 2 years have highlighted a number of supply chain vulnerabilities that require action. First, we've seen how the acute industrial land shortage in Vancouver and the Lower Mainland is constraining Canada's core supply chains. That's been brought into focus as Canadian exporters of containerized goods have faced challenges accessing the empty containers they needed to export. The container issues are globally based, but have been exacerbated by our region's land challenges. A second point I would emphasize is the importance of data sharing among all the supply chain players. We're leading a data sharing and analysis project in the Gateway and need the cooperation of all port users to ensure its success. The most consequential vulnerability that we're facing is that Canada's West Coast is on track to run out of container terminal capacity as early as the mid-2020s. If that happens, as a country, we're staring down a future of prolonged supply chain congestion. It also means a loss of trade sovereignty with greater reliance on U.S. ports for Canada's market access. Effectively, we'll see a repeat of the supply chain challenges Canadians are experiencing today due to global factors, except those challenges will return as a made-in-Canada problem. There are currently 4 container terminals at the Port of Vancouver, 2 in the Inner Harbour, 1 in the Fraser River, and 1 at Roberts Bank. Roberts Bank is of particular importance. With container ships continuing to grow in size, the largest ships cannot pass under the Lions Gate Bridge to reach the Inner Harbour and are only able to access Roberts Bank Terminal. For more than 10 years, the Port of Vancouver has been focused on the solution to this capacity challenge with strong support from our Indigenous partners. The Port Authority is leading the Roberts Bank Terminal 2 project, which we've designed under our public interest mandate, leveraging our deep experience building sustainable infrastructure to meet Canada's needs and ensure capacity and competition for Canadian importers and exporters. This project will be built on the same basis as previous major projects at the port, including the existing terminal at Roberts Bank. The Port Authority will build the terminal and lease it to a terminal operator, with the lease covering the cost of construction. In anticipation of this project, significant gateway and private sector funding has already gone into a number of road and rail projects, specifically focused on building grade separations and new roads to mitigate the impact of increased traffic on the communities along the rail corridor to Roberts Bank. This is a critical project for Canada and Canadians, and we're hopeful for a positive decision this year. Thank you for the opportunity to appear today. We look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miller. To kick off our round of questioning today, we have Ms. Landsman. Ms. Landsman, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses for joining, and some for rejoining, given our committee being cut short last time. So I appreciate it. And I on that note, Mr. White, I wanted to give you the opportunity. You finished last in your comments in the last committee, and you talked about some of the operations that you have in the U.S. that basically help run food supply for emergency disaster relief in many states, and essentially having warehouses of trucks ready in the case of hurricane. And I wanted you to remark a little bit on getting not just food or key supplies across that border, but some of the bottlenecks that you faced, the border regulations, the red tape. If you could expand on that and perhaps provide a suggestion to the committee about how we can alleviate some of that.
Okay, thank you, and I'll be brief. I appreciate the opportunity to come back today after Friday's abrupt closure of the meeting. But on the topic and the question asked, across the U.S., across Canada, and across parts of Europe, we represent the food service distribution logistics business, supplying food products to the food away from home industries that we all enjoy, whether it's restaurants, hotels, and in addition, healthcare locations and whatnot. In particular to this question, the challenges that we faced a few times recently due to extreme wildfires in Alberta and British Columbia, as well as the extreme flooding, the challenges we faced and the suggestion relate to access in and out of the U.S. in a crisis of Canadian food products, North American food products, in order to serve British Columbia more effectively in a crisis, was highlighted. And so as we think about the challenges and the recent appointment of a Minister of Crisis Management, the recommendation is to look at ways to work in cooperation with the U.S. border and the U.S. government to expedite decisions on opening and allowing the free movement of food and emergency goods in and out of our countries in a crisis. And this is the topic we bring to the table here as important. We don't have suggestions on how to build second and third rail lines and highways in and out of British Columbia, because that's the real problem that exists. And that's why we have this challenge today. But it comes back to allowing a swift and efficient opening and closure of border access. What we found during the most recent challenges of the floods of British Columbia, the Canadian government was very supportive of conversations to work through border access in and out of Canada to allow support for BC. But we found that the pandemic challenges at the same time created the red tape that prevented us from moving in and out of the province swiftly. And food needs to move by the hour, not by the month. And especially in a crisis, getting food to hospital and dire locations in British Columbia, we were hindered with these challenges. That's
I actually have
key
a
topic.
follow-up, Mr. White, if you'll allow it. You talked a little bit. I think you mean the Minister of Emergency Preparedness.
That's the one. Yes.
Although I suspect that some would call him the Minister of Emergencies and Crises. But in terms of your discussions, were they had with the Minister of Public Safety, the Minister of Emergency Preparedness, with CBSA more broadly? Were you talking to a number of different people, and you weren't getting anywhere? I'm trying to understand what the bottleneck was for getting the decision that you needed to get in order to move food quickly across the border.
It was all the above, and there was not a concerted, cooperative, organized discussion. We'll call it central control point to help us and many other industries work through this.
Much, and thanks for coming back to committee. I'll move to, since we have Mr. Miller here, the Vancouver Port Authority, or the Vancouver Fraser Port Authority. In terms of what would be the single biggest bottleneck that the port faces? I know that you went through some of them in terms of certainly COVID, but containers, unavailable containers, rail lines. If you could pinpoint one or two issues that we can look into further, what would they be?
Frankly, right now, the biggest challenge is inconsistency and unpredictability. That's particularly problematic in terms of container shipping. That's normally the most predictable. Those are ships that normally run on a schedule, and you know when they're arriving and you know where they're going. The challenge now is that particularly with some of the lockdowns that have taken place in China and the things that have happened previously, you're just not sure when things are going to arrive, and that leads to a level of congestion that is problematic. That causes ripple effects right through the whole supply chain. So that really, at the moment, or over the past over the months since we progressed on the recovery from the natural disasters, that's really been the biggest single challenge.
It seems that between disasters and COVID, they're not one in a lifetime events anymore. They're becoming consistent events. So is there any planning or resiliency that from the Port Authority's perspective that is happening now to make to see these as more regular events rather than events to plan for? Is there any planning within within your risk management planning that encompasses these events as now regular events?
Unfortunately, we're going to have to wait for the next round to hear the response to that question. Thank you very much, Ms. Landsman. Next, we have Ms. Katrakis. Ms. Katrakis, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all our witnesses for appearing here today and for your excellent testimony. I will begin. I'd like to go back to something that Mr. Kingston said in his testimony with regard to the Ambassador Bridge. Some are saying that the Ambassador Bridge blockade was not significant since overall trade did not seem to go down compared to last year. Can you comment on this from your members' perspective?
Absolutely happy to, and thank you for the question. I have seen commentary suggesting that, but the facts are clear when you look at the automotive industry. Significant costs were incurred by companies to come up with solutions to work around the Ambassador Bridge. So we saw shipments being routed to the Blue Water Bridge, for example. And ultimately, we did see production shutdowns on both sides of the border, which had an immediate impact on jobs. So volumes did go down in the auto industry with respect to shipping. There was a job impact and there was a cost impact. I also note that the comparisons that are being made from the data this year to last year, it really isn't an adequate comparison. We're in a very unique environment right now because of all of the supply chain challenges related to COVID, where overall trade volumes are down quite significantly from pre-COVID levels. So those comparisons I don't think are adequate. I can assure you the impact was serious and significant.
Thank you. I will remain with the automakers, and anyone can answer. Please jump in. Can you describe what actions you or your member companies have taken to make your supply chains more resilient? We've heard what you would like to see from the government, but what have your members done to make the supply chains more resilient?
Sure, I'm happy to start on that. So automakers are investing hundreds of millions of dollars into, first of all, building an electric vehicle supply chain as part of the integrated North American automotive market. And with that comes more resiliency being put into the auto supply chain. One simple example, I mentioned the semiconductor shortage. Automakers have been making announcements with respect to joint ventures and partnerships with semiconductor manufacturers to have a more direct line of sight into that manufacturing process. In addition to that, in the United States, the CHIPS Act is going forward with $52 billion to enhance U.S. domestic chip manufacturing, which will have a very, very positive impact on the North American industry. So a lot is happening to make automaker supply chains more resilient.
Is there anyone else that would like to chime in?
I'll chime in. I just maybe build a little bit on something Dave Miller said, in that, we are facing sort of waves of inconsistency, and so you get what you plan for. And we've definitely sort of, in terms of resiliency, we work very closely with incredible partners in the rail industry and others to be able to very quickly respond when things take place. And to your earlier question, yeah, the impact was hundreds of millions of dollars in impact just because of the Ambassador Bridge. But it's not just the Ambassador Bridge. We face rail strike threats, we blockades, and we have to be able to respond to these things quickly. And so the more that you can advance plan for these things, the better. But one other aspect, and sort of building on what Brian says, is that with technology change to electric vehicles, for example, the supply chain will change as well. And so while we have for 100 years sourced engines and transmissions, we're going to now source batteries, and the batteries will need to source minerals. And so some companies have different strategies in terms of how to approach that. But in our case, it will involve more ownership, if you will, or investment in some of the aspects of that supply chain. And so as we would describe it, we have these enormous, often 3-4 tiers of suppliers, but we'll be more engaged and even take equity positions, as we're doing in Quebec, where we're building cathode active material processing.
Thank you for that. My next question is to the Vancouver Fraser Port Authority and Prince Rupert Port Authority. I'm in the process of hosting various supply chain summits regionally and both thematic. And in these supply chain roundtables, we've heard often times from other port authorities that automation, we need to give more attention to automation. What would need to happen in order to achieve greater automation? And are you aware of other ports in the world where this has already happened? And if so, how has this affected their respective supply chains?
My colleague, Mr. Rogie, may want to add to this, but no, I mean, we have what we think is a pretty good mix in terms of we have terminals that are partially automated. We think it's worked out quite well. We have a good relationship with our unions, and have a model that we really think is quite successful. So we're not particularly looking or pushing for greater automation. It varies from terminal to terminal, but it seems to have worked well. Greg, I don't know if you have anything you want to add.
Yes, thank you, David. I think you're right on. I would say one example would be the Centerm terminal project that's ongoing right now. It's been in process for about a year and a half now. That particular project is aiming to increase the footprint of the terminal by 15%, but improve its throughput by 60%. And a lot of that is through optimization. And that's the kind of activity that we need to see more of. So you're seeing, a significant improvement in throughput and optimization through, relatively modest increases in size. And
Thank you very much,
there's
Ms.
certain-
Katrakis. Next, prochainement, nous avons Monsieur Xavier Barcelou-Duval. Monsieur.
And now we'll hear from Mr. Xavier Barcelou-Duval. You have the floor, sir, for 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question is for Mr. Gervais of Lion Electric. A little earlier, you shared with us that during the pandemic, you used strategies such as stocking enough products to be able to continue business, ensure you had more suppliers, and so on. Do you think that these are long-term issues that will be ongoing, or was this a short-term problem during the pandemic only? So all said and done, how much do you think the government could undertake approaches that could help you face such situations in future? Yes. For the supply chain at Lyon, we did indeed source a good deal of essential goods such as motors, suspensions, and batteries. There are some components, though, that we hadn't thought of ahead of time, such as glue or a number of electronic and electrical components. For example, we set up a partnership with Promac, which became ProEV, which undertook to newly develop electric products. This is a Quebec company that got investments from outside of Canada, tens of thousands, millions of dollars actually, to be able to offer their goods in North America. Every time we run into a problem, we try to work with partners locally, local partners, to try to solve the problem in the supply chain. Perhaps as a follow-up, what I'm seeing is that you at Lyon aim for shorter supply chains. So I would like to know what sort of advantage that gives you as a business and what advantage it might offer the sector having these shorter supply chains working locally, and what sort of government policy should be set up if it's really advantageous to have these local supply chains. We truly feel that to accelerate the electrification of the transport system, support is needed to support the supply chain. If we develop expertise locally, we will have higher volume and we will reduce costs at the same time. That's our aim, creating ecosystems, you see. We have a good deal of expertise already, a lot of knowledge. We're highly innovative. We come up with new approaches in Canada. We're not afraid of doing that. So if we develop that within local supply chains, thanks to policies that support the growth of local business, including by bringing in foreign funding to set up here minerals, for example, critical minerals, to speak of that only. So it's terribly important for us to ensure that people come, set up here, higher volume, reduce cost, heighten our competitivity, and will work better internationally. So having the government set up local supply chain policies, you think that's logical. Perhaps you could tell us more about that. But before that, I'd like to touch on something else. Other witnesses who have spoken to us here in committee have suggested it might be relevant to have a carbon tariff on imports, given that the legislation is dissimilar from country to country. And this would help us fight climate change and also level the playing field for Canada. What do you think of that? Of course, having legislation in place that will, support the manufacturing of zero-emission vehicles, well, that's like obvious. It's really a win-win situation. That seems obvious to us. Beyond that, to favor a better environment and a better economy, we'll be supporting all such policies. My next question then will be for General Motors, but should Mr. Gervais want to add anything else, because it might be relevant to you as well, Mr. Gervais. So, General Motors, you've mentioned that you will be aiming for vertical integration to even level the playing field for suppliers in your work. So what does that require? What are you having to do that? And when it comes to local short supply chains, is this a vision that you have as well? I will answer in English if you allow.
The investments that we're making are being made with our suppliers and in joint venture. So these are new supply chains in many ways. In the electric battery world, much of the supply of what has gone into electric batteries has been sourced traditionally from Asia. Places ranging from Indonesia to China, etc. And so we have a really historic opportunity to localize the electric vehicle battery industry in North America. And that has all kinds of geopolitical benefits. It has business benefits and the like, but they have to be predictable. They have to be competitive and the like. The good news is Quebec is extremely competitive for the processing of minerals because of our abundance of affordable, low GHG power, excellent infrastructure, etc. So we've been incredibly impressed with Quebec and the work that is being done there, and we will develop our supply chains in partnership there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Patterson. Merci beaucoup, Mr. Barcelou-Duval. And next up, we have Mr. Bachrach. Mr. Bachrach, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to begin my questions with Mr. Veldman from the Port of Prince Rupert. Obviously, the Port of Prince Rupert is a very important player in the Northwest, in the beautiful part of the world that I get to represent. And I really appreciate the time that Mr. Veldman has spent over the past several years sharing with me some of the port's plans and the impact that it has on our region. So, Mr. Veldman, going back to the challenges in British Columbia around the flooding, I understand that the Port of Prince Rupert was able to play a role in ensuring that the West Coast supply chain was kept as intact as possible. Could you speak a little bit to that role that the port played?
I can. Thank you, Taylor. Obviously there was a very unexpected event there. And certainly with, and especially with our partners at CN, we were able to divert several shipments that otherwise would have been bound in and out of Vancouver for a number of products, both agri, coal, containers, and certainly there was a lot of additional resources that were dedicated to that, and again, not just from a port perspective, but certainly from a railway perspective, to ensure that we were able to be part of that solution in terms of keeping that commerce moving and responding as effective as possible during that time. But in a larger sense, I think what it really spoke to was the value to Canada of developing that redundancy, if you will, on the West Coast. Ensuring that we've got the capacity and capabilities to manage those situations as nimbly and as effectively as possible was really brought home. And certainly that isn't just in cause of emergency. The reality is that capacity, competitiveness, having flexibility and options for shippers in terms of not just the geographic supply chain that's being used, but different modes adds value at the end of the day to our exporters and our importers, and on an ongoing basis, that's going to be really key for Canada's future, especially when you start to look at the development of the Indo-Pacific region.
Thanks, Mr. Veldman. And just following up on that, I know that the Port of Prince Rupert has some bold plans for expansion. As we see more and more challenges around extreme weather, around potential risks like future pandemics, could you speak and share with the committee how the expansion plans that the Port of Prince Rupert has increase the resilience of the supply chain on Canada's West Coast?
Yeah, I absolutely can. We, as I said in my opening remarks, we've seen remarkable growth over the last 10 to 15 years, really to the benefit of Canada, and we expect that our next decade will be just as dynamic. Certainly on the intermodal side of things, we're seeing already significant expansion again. Our partners DP World will be completing a container terminal expansion in July of this year that will add significant capacity, and are entering another phase of expansion at Fairview Container Terminal as well. We've entered into a feasibility assessment agreement with DP World to look at an additional terminal in the future that would bring another 2 million TEUs of capacity to the Prince Rupert Gateway. But it's not just all an intermodal story, also very much a bulk story, and in particular, as we see Canada transition to being a leader in lower emission or zero emission energies, the export supply chains for that are going to be absolutely critical. Prince Rupert has been playing a leading role already in terms of, in particular, LPG exports and propane. We've had 2 terminals developed by both AltaGas and Pembina within the Port of Prince Rupert in the last 2 years. And as we start to look at future fuels, whether that be other LPGs, whether that be methanol, et cetera, we're very well placed to be able to do that. And one of the things that makes us really well placed is, our very sustainable approach to development, both on our environmental as well as with our partnerships with Indigenous communities, but also the fact that we've got room to grow. And that room to grow, as you've heard from my colleagues in Vancouver, is a challenge in Canada. And certainly the north coast of BC does offer some really unique opportunities to be able to do that and do it within a master infrastructure plan that we continue to execute here to ensure that it's done sustainably and safely.
Thanks, Mr. Veldman, and thank you, Mr. Chair. I think my time's got a couple seconds, but probably not enough time.
Thank you, Mr. Bachrach.
A question.
Appreciate that. Next, we have Mr. Muse. Mr. Muse, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you to all the witnesses for your perspective today. I appreciate that. Just driving around in Ontario, I've heard now twice radio ads for car dealerships, and I know we're talking to the manufacturers, that actually, in different parts of the province, that actually reference supply chain issues. And so it's kind of struck me that the heightened awareness of supply chain issues in the public consciousness has gotten down to the fact that it's now in, radio ads on local radio stations. And so, I'm just curious because, these were from car dealerships, and so that's obviously an important part of your distribution network, and they have an important role in communities in terms of, fleets for businesses and tradespeople and people who are building critical infrastructure. So what are you hearing from your dealers? What are you saying to them? And just maybe some thoughts on just overall the fact that it's come to that.
Maybe if I could start, thanks very much for that question. I think, supply chain issue has become a common verbiage, I think, from Home Depot to car dealerships to everything else these days. But I think what it's indicative of is the fact that manufacturers have obviously conveyed to their dealers the challenges around securing product. And this is owing to comments that Mr. Patterson made, Mr. Kingston made, I made myself, concerning the issues related to the pandemic. The most obvious challenge has been chip shortages, but the industry has really been fraught with all sorts of different challenges. I think Mr. Gervais mentioned glue, for instance. There have been a myriad of different supply chain challenges. So this is causing, obviously, production delays for vehicles of all sorts, not whether they be EVs or ICE vehicles, all sorts, which is resulting in obviously lower inventories at dealer lots, which is probably the reason why dealers are notifying their consumers that they will be challenged to supply vehicles for the foreseeable future.
So to Mr. Veldman of the Prince Rupert Port Authority, you had referenced in your recommendations more timely, more certain regulatory processes. Wondering if you could be a bit more specific and elaborate on some of the specific pain points or or areas of red tape or barriers that could be removed. That because you indicated that obviously that's resulting in some delays, and maybe as well the Vancouver Port Authority may have a perspective on that too, given their size as a port in Canada.
Yeah, thank you. I'd be happy to. We've got, I mentioned earlier, the size of our investment portfolio. We've got private sector investment that is ready to be deployed. The reality is that we've got projects, whether it be export logistics transload, whether it be Vopak Pacific Canada and their proposal to move more transitional fuels on an export basis. These are absolutely critical in terms of time. And to be clear, the suggestion is not to remove red tape. The suggestion is that these processes become more efficient and transparent. These are projects that are small enough that they don't meet the threshold of a full designated project underneath the Impact Assessment Agency, and yet they continue to be years to complete an environmental effect evaluation, and we just need to be faster. These global supply chains, they are critical to Canada's competitiveness. We often think about it on an export basis, but what we're hearing today is also on an import basis. To be able to develop these kind of competitive capacities within Canada, we need to have a fully integrated leading edge supply chain. And as we look to bring in these critical pieces of trade infrastructure, lagging behind our competitors in terms of being able to put these capacities and capabilities in place are to our own detriment. The rest of the world is moving very fast. We have to find ways to be competitive on a timely basis as well.
Anything further from the Vancouver Port Authority? It sounds like Canada's falling behind.
There's no question. It's been a real challenge. I spoke about the new terminal we're hoping to build. We've been 9 years in the environmental review process. Even if we do get approval this year, there are several more permits we'll require, and then it's a 6-year construction period. So that's a long period from beginning to end. So no question. I mean, we would certainly believe that a more efficient, faster process would be in everybody's best interests. We have the power to approve certain projects within the port ourselves. Our terminals and other partners sometimes feel that we take too long to approve them, but for us to take 2 years would be pretty rare.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miller, and thank you very much, Mr. Muse. Next, we have Mr. Chahal. Mr. Chahal, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for presenting today. I'm going to start off with Mr. Patterson from GM. Our recent budget 2022 proposed to provide $1.5 billion in targeted support towards critical minerals projects, and you highlighted that this is a generational opportunity in the EV market. You also stated to mine, move, process, and recycle, and that you welcomed the critical minerals plan in the budget. But you mentioned that we got to get this policy framework right. Could you elaborate on what you would like to see to get this policy framework right?
Yeah, we've, I think, been first amongst the auto companies to sort of make a significant processing announcement, but we're certainly not the only ones. There's a number that are moving quickly. We see that different provinces are moving in this area, but they're doing so because of their constitutional sort of responsibilities in these areas. Quebec, I think, perhaps moved most quickly and impressively in this regard. Ontario is taking some steps as well. And we need to, I think, align our federal processes. Some of these issues are going to be not dissimilar to what we just talked about with regard to the Port of Vancouver, and that's going to be timing of being able to either accelerate current reserves that are in place. So, for example, in the electric battery area, one of the areas that Canada has a distinct advantage in is nickel. It's one of the most essential of the processed materials, particularly for cathode active materials. We don't have huge resources in the United States or Mexico in that area. There are some, but that's just one example of where we've got some distinct, we're blessed with some competitive advantage. And so being able to move those or accelerate those reserves and be able to then coordinate the processing of those, I think, is integration between federal and provincial. It's resources, it is regulatory timing to be able to move forward. I have to say I'm impressed with Quebec being on the front foot to try and just solve problems day in, day out. And I'm doing this half of my day every day to move those things forward. But when you look at the opportunity, it's huge. I mean, we'll probably see a significant tick up on what we're doing already.
Thank you for that. My next question's to the Port Authorities. And maybe Mr. Miller or Mr. Roge, who I guess is the land person in charge at the Vancouver Port Authority. We talked about the challenges at potentially the ports and the congestion there. What are the opportunities available at our inland ports? Calgary, and my riding specifically, we have the airport, but we have CP headquartered here in Calgary with a connection to Vancouver, but we also have the CN Spur line. And so I guess, what are the opportunities from the port's perspective with the shortage of land in Vancouver here in Calgary or in Edmonton?
Greg, do you want to?
Sure. Thank you for the question. I would say certainly there's definitely opportunities to leverage inland capacity. We have the Ashcroft facility, and we've certainly seen a number of large BCOs move into the Calgary area. But it also requires, like, the infrastructure within the port and the container capacity is still critical. And all of the discussion we've had about timely transparency, approval of large infrastructure projects, those are still essential. And they're precursors to private investment as well. We heard the Port of Prince Rupert talk about there's a lot of private investment that's ready to go, and we have the same thing. And they are precursors to those kinds of things. So there's definitely opportunities from inland facilities. We would like to see that leveraged, but we still need to solve the problem that we have with capacity issues within the terminal area itself.
So what can you offload to our inland ports while you deal with those challenges and capacity? And with the shortage of land in Vancouver, what can you offload to centers like Calgary, Edmonton, Regina to help support your space requirements?
There's a lot of transloading that occurs. So particularly with the container rates that are occurring today, containers are coming into the West Coast ports. Then they're being transloaded from marine containers into intermodal containers to be moved east. The warehousing capacity in the Lower Mainland it's at capacity and past. So moving those kinds of intermodal or rail containers farther east into some of the inland capacity and allow the transloading to occur in those locations, that's definitely an opportunity that can occur outside of the Lower Mainland of Vancouver.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chahal, and thank you very much, Mr. Rogi. Can I just ask you, and I believe I'm pronouncing your last name right, and if I'm not, please correct me. Can I just ask you to turn or select your microphone? The interpreters have just informed us that they're having difficulty with interpretation because I don't believe your microphone is selected properly. At the bottom left of your screen, I think you have to select it.
I will attempt to do so.
Okay. Let us know if you're having any difficulties, and we'll work with you to get that done. Prochainement, nous avons M. Barcelou.
Now we will hear from Mr. Barcelou-Duval. Mr. Barcelou-Duval, you have 2.5 minutes. The floor is yours, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for Mr. Kingston of the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association. I've noted in recent months that your association has, to put it mildly, been quite critical of the government's approach to vehicle electrification and transport electrification. In particular, you have criticized the very aims of these projects, but would like to know why you think that the sector doesn't have the means to get to electrification of the transport system, and do you think that the government strategy, if there is a strategy, perhaps that's the right question, in your opinion, whether the strategy will work? I'd like to hear you on that in general.
Well, as I've outlined in my remarks, the industry and CVMA members are investing billions into electrification. So you're going to see more and more vehicles coming to market, and many of these vehicles are going to be built right here in Canada. The challenge that we're seeing with the government strategy is on the demand side of the equation. We're being very successful in building an EV supply chain here in Canada, but to achieve the targets that the government has set out, we have to help consumers make the switch to electric. And we know what those barriers are. They've been very well documented by government surveys, by industry surveys, and that is the cost of electric vehicles. They are more expensive than gas-powered vehicles. And as we've outlined, due to some of the supply chain challenges, you're actually seeing the prices increasing. And on top of that, charging infrastructure. No one will buy an electric vehicle if they don't think that they can charge it at home or access convenient public charging infrastructure. So while we're completely aligned with the government on the ambition to get more Canadians into electric vehicles, the government's approach is to introduce a regulated sales mandate to regulate the vehicles that Canadians buy. That is not the right approach. We've seen leading jurisdictions around the world, the top four, actually, the top four countries that are leading in ZEV adoption, they don't use the regulatory sales tool to do that. What they've done is they've built comprehensive charging infrastructure and a range of incentives to help every Canadian purchase and make that switch to electric. So we'd like to see more done on that. And we've got plenty of ideas on how to achieve that and ultimately work with the government to get to the sales targets that they've laid out.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kingston. Merci beaucoup, Mr. Barclay-Duval. Next, we have Mr. Bachrach. Mr. Bachrach, the floor is yours. You have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to pick up right where Mr. Barclay-Duval left off, and perhaps with some questions to Mr. Patterson from GM for no other reason than I drive a GM electric vehicle, and it's been doing really well for my family and I. But I'm keen to ask some questions about these electric vehicle mandates, because Canada's climate plan leans heavily on the adoption of electric vehicles to meet the emissions targets. They want 20% of light-duty electric vehicle or light-duty vehicles sold by 2026 to be zero-emissions vehicles. Right now, we're at 5%, so we're not going to hit 20% with the current policies that are in place and with the current patterns of adoption. Around the world, we see jurisdictions that have these mandates in place, and they tend to, I think a little bit contrary to what Mr. Kingston said, we tend to see those jurisdictions have higher adoption and they have more supply of vehicles for consumers. Certainly in Canada, most of the electric vehicles sold are in Quebec and BC, the two provinces that have supply mandates. So my question for Mr. Patterson from GM, so first of all, what is GM's position on a national ZEV supply mandate? And secondly, putting yourself in the shoes of the federal government, given the goals that we have, given what we see around the world, why wouldn't you put in place one of these supply mandates to make sure that consumers have access to the vehicles that they want to buy?
Well, first of all, I completely agree with what Mr. Kingston just said. And to be able to move Canadians to electric vehicle purchases is not simply a function of sort of pushing demand. Now, my company is all in on electrification. We're going to have all of our light-duty vehicles electrified by 2035, and we've got a slew of them coming into the market right now. We're making a $35 billion bet on this, and it will be a complete disaster if we cannot sell those vehicles. So what's different in the electric vehicle area is consumers. Consumers have to make this decision. And as Brian just said, if the consumers are not able to, in the transitionary period, while EV batteries and vehicles are more expensive, have some assistance to move into that, or if there's no sufficient charging, or you can't charge in your apartment, or you can't charge on your street, people are going to make decisions with their wallets and with their sensibilities. So we have to join the dots between these policies. You know, countries like Norway that are famously talked about as having the highest EV adoption level don't have sales mandates. They're actually oil producing countries. What they do is have very smart incentives for consumers to get them attracted to electric vehicles. We need that to take place, or our electrification strategy will fail. And we need to make sure the electric grid is going to be ready to go for those things. And so you have to join the dots. It was famously sort of compared to this adoption of EVs is kind of like asking Canadians to all lose weight because we need to cure obesity.
I think the challenge, Mr. Patterson, if I may, and I've just got a couple seconds left, is that in Canada, in many provinces, we have unmet demand. There's more consumer demand than there are vehicles, and we're trying to figure out how to get more of your vehicles into the hands of consumers that are on wait lists for them. So it doesn't seem like the problem is enough charging infrastructure, certainly not in British Columbia. The issue is not enough electric vehicles on the lots. And how do we convince these companies like yours to supply more electric vehicles for consumers who clearly want them?
Yeah, you don't have to convince my company. We have them pouring towards us. And if there are people that have orders, the only reasons that people are getting slow orders is because of other things we're talking about, like supply chain issues, like semiconductor chips and the like. You do have a shortage problem outside of the Lower Mainland in British Columbia, I beg to differ. And you do have a direct correlation between Quebec and British Columbia because you are the only two provinces that have sales assistance in those provinces. It really doesn't have to do with your sales mandate. I can tell you as a company that operates in both those jurisdictions that our sales of vehicles in EVs in British Columbia and Quebec are not because of sales mandates. They are because there are more aggressive sales targets and there is a better charging network, but it's insufficient.
Thank you very much, Mr. Patterson, and thank you very much, Mr. Backrack. Next, we have Mr. Dowdle. Mr. Dowdle, you have 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank all our witnesses for their testimony today. I kind of wish that it was broken up into two sections because there's a lot to ask on both, whether it's the port or the automobile business. I just want to ask maybe a question to Brian and perhaps let's say the fellow from General Motors. I have Honda in my riding, Honda manufacturer, very proud, and I know they got some funding lately, but what I've been told or sort of heard from some of the people in the industry is that, and I heard that before, that it should be industry driven, perhaps government driven. Are we giving enough, I guess, or looking enough into hybrid vehicles as perhaps a better way to move forward, to get that out there, to get to the spot where we want to be? I think we're putting so much effort, and that's what I'm kind of hearing, that this is what we want. And I think it's the right way, don't get me wrong. But as an example, I have people in my riding that buy 4 or 5 year old cars all the time just because they can't afford it. We know inflation is up. There's costs. There's a huge segment of society that's like that, that's going to have to buy used ZEV vehicles down the road, which will certainly be difficult. But all I'm saying is, do you think we're maybe from the manufacturing side, do you think they're sort of discounting the hybrid section?
Yes, on that question, I'll pass it over to Dave Adams. He represents Honda specifically. So,
great, thanks, Brian. Yeah, thanks very much for your question, Mr. Dowdle. Appreciate it. You're right. I mean, I think when we look at the challenge that's before us, and it speaks to the previous question as well, what we need to look at is a wide range of options to get to where the government wants to go. And I think the whole industry is of the view that our focus should be on reduction of greenhouse gas emissions from transportation, not a particular technology that gets put on the road. So this is going to take, as you say, the wide spectrum of electrification from conventional hybrid electric vehicles to plug-in hybrid electric vehicles to pure BEVs to fuel cell electric vehicles. We need all that. And then we also need, frankly, renewable fuels and also reduced carbon fuels, low carbon fuels for the existing vehicles on the road. So thank you very much for that question. Appreciate it.
Thank you. David, do you have your hand up to speak, or is your hand just left up?
Unmute myself here. I just add, I don't think Honda would mind me pointing out that we have a partnership for electric vehicle development and batteries in North America. in our company at General Motors, we've decided to go pure battery electric and not sort of skip steps with gasoline vehicles that also have a little bit of battery support in them. We do believe we can get to the point where we can sell full battery electric vehicles at a very cost competitive rate, and that we should put our head down and get there, because frankly it cuts more greenhouse gas. So every company is going to have a different pathway and strategy and investments that go with it, and we should support them all in that movement. But I don't think there is a silver bullet in this. There's silver buckshot.
I guess maybe just a follow-up to that. I don't know if we're putting the cart before the horse particularly, but for the infrastructure that we have, I'm more speaking here in Ontario, depending on, do we have the infrastructure if everyone starts buying these, and what date are we looking at? So that's my concern as well, because the system will fail if that happens. If we start selling all kinds of vehicles and we don't really have the infrastructure, one of two things, perhaps maybe have brownouts, or people just be frustrated with their purchase.
Yeah, I can answer that part of that. There are two components to it. First of all, no, we don't have the infrastructure. We're not even close. The federal government committed 50,000 public chargers in the most recent budget. According to our estimates, a fully electrified fleet will require millions, upwards of 4 million publicly accessible chargers. So we're not even remotely close to what will be required. Secondly, from an electricity generation perspective, very important that the federal government is coordinating with utilities, provincial governments, and grid operators, because if we do achieve the levels of ZEV adoption that the current targets are putting us on track for, there will be a spike in energy demand, and we have to make sure that that's managed appropriately, because the last thing you want to do is have someone make the shift to an EV and then be frustrated by energy prices, or frustrated by a lack of charging, and then go back to a gas-powered vehicle. We must avoid that outcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And do I
Just
have
two,
time?
2 seconds, if I could, Mr. Dowdle. I think the important thing too is that, as Brian mentioned earlier, that infrastructure needs to be built out now. It needs to precede the vehicles coming to the road to give consumers the confidence to actually purchase them.
Thank you. Do I have time for one more quick question, Mr.
Sorry,
Chair?
Mr. Dowdle, that was at 5 minutes on the nose, so very well done.
Okay, no problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Badaway, the floor is now yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'd like to drill down a bit on some of the comments that Mr. Kingston had made with respect to mandates. Mr. Kingston, you argue that a ZEV mandate will take us out of the regulatory alignment with the United States. And yet, it is not the case that multiple American states have committed to ZEV mandates of their own. Can you comment on that, please?
Yes, thank you. This industry exists because we have a long history since the 1960s of regulatory alignment with the U.S. We build cars for a North American market. And so making the move to, not only has the government chosen to put in place a ZEV sales mandate, which is out of line with the federal US, that's the key. You are right, there are some states that have this, but at the federal US level, there is no ZEV sales mandate. So we are now coming out of long-standing regulatory alignment with the US, which is very serious and should be avoided. And that is a significant change. Not only that, but the government has now misaligned its sales targets with the United States. We were currently on track previous to the emissions reduction plan to target a 50% ZEV sales rate in 2030. The federal government's changed that to 60%. And what underpins all of this is that we have aligned emissions regulations with the federal EPA. We cannot move out of alignment. It makes investment in Canada a challenge, and there is no reason to do so. The Americans are on the same track as us. We have to work with them and keep our alignment.
So with that said, Mr. Kingston, in fact, is it not the case that 14 American states, accounting for nearly 40% of new U.S. car sales, namely California, Connecticut, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, Oregon, Rhode Island, Vermont, Colorado, Washington, Virginia, and Minnesota, have adopted ZEV standards?
That's correct, with California being the most significant of those markets.
And so, in fact, the U.S. at the state level is quickly adopting a ZEV mandate, and the risk of regulatory misalignment to Canada is actually more in going too slow and doing the same?
No, I disagree, because we align with the federal EPA, not with state. We can't start aligning our regulations with individual U.S. states.
So is it not the case that other countries as well are also committed to ZEV mandates? For instance, China and South Korea. And won't countries that have ZEV mandates be prioritized when it comes to securing ZEV vehicles from manufacturers? After all, like the ones you represent, are still going to want to sell vehicles in these markets as well? No?
No, because if you look at the 4 leading ZEV jurisdictions in the world, none of them have a ZEV mandate, and none of them have had issue accessing the vehicles that their consumers demand.
And just going on that as well, I guess I'll go in a different direction with respect to the commissioning of a study by Transport Canada. Is it not the case that a February 2020 study commissioned by Transport Canada found that nearly 70% of dealerships in Canada do not have a single EV available to purchase or test drive, and that wait times of 3 to 6 months were common?
Yes, I'm familiar with that study. That study actually found a significant increase in ZEV inventories across Canada. ZEV inventories are prioritized where there is ZEV demand. So a dealership that sells 1 ZEV every year will not carry 10 ZEVs on its lot because there's no one there to purchase them. Where you have dealerships where there's a lot of demand and a lot of interest, they will stock those vehicles. So looking at countrywide inventory levels and dealerships in rural areas, for example, where you see no demand, that's not an issue until the demand increases for those goods. I would also note too, given everything we've outlined here, there are real supply chain challenges with respect to all vehicles. So regulating sales in a supply constrained world doesn't solve that challenge.
So while the overall availability of ZEVs has improved compared to previous reports, is it not the case that currently the majority of dealerships in Canada still have 0 ZEVs in inventory?
The current situation is that most dealerships have very little inventory of all vehicles.
Okay, so well, wouldn't go that far. I actually passed a few on the way in Ottawa yesterday, and I'm seeing them all fill back up. But when it comes to the other vehicles, it's not the case. I also understand, Mr. Kingston, that less than a quarter of dealerships nationwide have 3 or more ZEVs in stock, and that outside of Quebec, BC, and Ontario, only 18% of dealerships have any ZEVs available at all, and only 4% have 5 or more. Are those stats accurate, more or less?
I would have to see them, but they sound to be consistent. Again, just to note what Mr. Patterson said, Quebec and BC have significant provincial incentives. When you have a strong incentive in the market, you will see greater demand for ZEVs and therefore bigger inventories at dealerships. It has nothing to do with the sales mandate.
Okay, and if supply is so limited, does that not suggest the need for stronger and more urgent regulatory action, such as ZEV mandates, as I mentioned earlier in my first question?
It does not, because mandating ZEV sales does not address a global semiconductor shortage. That will make no difference whatsoever.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Kingston. How much time do I have left?
That's it, Mr. Badaway. Thank you very much.
Oh, that's it?
That's it. Thank you, Mr. Kingston. Next, we have Ms. Landsman. Ms. Landsman, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thanks. I'm going to actually stay on this because I appreciate the conversation we're having, and I think that it'll inform the study on the supply chain crunch. But I'd ask you, Mr. Kingston, we're now, you agree that we are infusing the electric vehicle market with incentives at the manufacturer's level, at the consumer level, at the infrastructure level. Can you talk a little bit about what the companies that you represent are actually doing to push adoption and sales on their own? And not to mention that we, in most provinces, particularly the one that we happen to be sitting in, incentivizes or frankly pumps money into electricity at the tune of $7 billion. So at every point there is tax money infused into this. Can you talk a little bit about why this, why, frankly, what you think the industry should do to get people to adopt this without the government help?
Thank you. The single most important thing that industry is doing right now, and my members in particular, is bringing larger vehicles to market that are electrified. Canadians and North Americans love SUVs and pickup trucks. And you're seeing Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis investing over $100 billion US into electrification, with a huge amount of that dedicated to bringing vehicles like the Silverado, like the Ford F-150, like the Dodge Ram into the market in an electrified version. 80% of sales in Canada are of SUVs and pickup trucks. So that to me is a game changer. As those vehicles come into market, you're going to be accessing a whole new segment of the Canadian consumer that wants to have a pickup truck and currently can't buy an electrified version right now. So I think that is extremely important. I'd also note that some manufacturers are also building out their own charging infrastructure, General Motors in particular.
Mr. Kingston, can you talk about if you've asked the government for any additional incentives at either the manufacturers, the consumer, or the infrastructure? And can you talk about what those are?
Yes, when it comes to consumer incentives, we've asked for a larger federal incentive. Currently, $5,000 is provided. But the challenge with the larger vehicles that are coming to market, like a pickup truck, they have a large battery inside them. And what that means is the cost is higher right now. We do expect battery technology to advance. The price will come down. But to give a consumer a pickup truck with the range that they demand, 300, 400, 500 kilometers of range, that means a bigger battery and a bigger expense. And a $5,000 incentive, when you think, the median household income in this country is about $60,000. $5,000 is not going to be enough to help all Canadian households make the switch to electric. So we've asked for a much bigger consumer incentive if the government wishes to achieve its sales targets.
And anything on the infrastructure incentive? Or I shouldn't say incentive, but at the cash that goes towards building additional infrastructure. You mentioned in your comments that we are not even close, as you put it.
Yes, so we've asked a couple of things. First of all, we'd like the federal government to have a stronger coordinating role with provinces and utilities to actually figure out where we need infrastructure and how to prioritize the spend. We saw the 50,000 commitment, but we don't have a detailed plan. If you look at other jurisdictions that are doing this, they put out annual reports with detailed right down to a postal code level of what infrastructure is going to be required, what the energy generation demands will be, and what grid capacity is needed. We're not doing that in Canada. So that's the first ask. Secondly, we just need a more ambitious target. As I said previously, 50,000 charges is not going to cut it. So they're have to invest more and build more charging infrastructure. I just want to make one final note. We do not expect that this is all going to be on the public sector. Of course, as more ZEVs become available on the road, the overall market will grow and there will be a strong private sector imperative to build charging infrastructure. But right now, of the total vehicle market, the total vehicle fleet on the road, only 0.2% of those vehicles are electrified. So that's why you need the government to play a role to make this investment happen now. And as Dave Adams said, to overbuild now. And then eventually, as the ZEBS fleet increases, you'll see a lot of private sector capital flowing into that space.
Can you speak to Can you speak to in terms of I hear where you are on the sales mandate and the fact that it's certainly it's certainly not it's not something that necessarily works. But can you speak to any of the conversations that you've already had with government on my colleague Mr. Badaway's point earlier on getting these things into dealerships and into lots and having the supply for those who want to adopt this ready and so they are able to purchase them?
15-second response, please.
Automakers are moving extremely quickly right now with the investments that I've outlined to increase the number of EVs coming into the market. So that is happening immediately. We have to resolve these supply chain challenges, the semiconductor issue in particular. Regulation's not going to do it. We've got to resolve those issues and support automakers as they go on this journey to electrification.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kingston, and thank you very much, Ms. Landsman. Next, we have Mr. Angelo Iacono. Mr. Iacono, vous avez 5 minutes. La parole est à vous.
You have 5 minutes, sir. The floor is yours. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would like to thank the witnesses for being with us here this morning. My first question is for Mr. Kingston. I can certainly understand that some manufacturers have said that a ZEV mandate would bring Canada out of alignment with the United States, for example, and that might lead to some negative effects on investment and jobs for Canada and on supply chains for that type of vehicle. Yet we know that most manufacturers have already signaled that they intend to switch over to ZEVs in the coming years. The federal government has worked with the sector to provide important investments in batteries and the manufacture of ZEVs in Canada. Could you just say more about your position on this?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, you're absolutely right. The government has been very aggressive in working to attract more investment into Canada. In fact, I'm speaking to you today from Windsor, where we're, in 20 minutes we're about to hear another exciting EV investment. So a lot of work has been done with the government at the federal and provincial level to help build an EV supply chain here in Canada. When it comes to the regulation, that's not going to change the journey that we're on. Automakers, as we've outlined, at least from my perspective, CVMA, we're all in on electrification. Very, very aggressive EV production targets, 8 million units of production by 2025 by my members alone. So we need to help the industry in this transition. Regulating sales and taking us out of alignment with the US won't do anything. That doesn't help that transition. What we have to do is focus on the infrastructure, build out that EV supply chain, including the support for critical minerals, and help make this shift possible for every Canadian. It has to be affordable for every Canadian, and we're just simply not there yet.
Merci, Monsieur Kingston. Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Kingston. Mr. Patterson now. What have you learned about supply chains in your sector of activity over the last few years? I'm thinking of climate emergencies on the West Coast and also disruption in the ports.
Yeah, I would say that we constantly, over time, have faced disruptions in the supply chain. Famously, the automotive supply chain is a just-in-time supply chain, and there's no inventory on the floor of our vehicle plants, and so we count on everything arriving just in time. That has been challenged because of climate change effects, as we saw in British Columbia, and impacts on ports. We saw the border challenge at the Windsor Bridge. But, over time, we've had these challenges quite frequently. And we've built a resilience into our management, our people management of supply chains. And I think the answer from the automotive perspective, in my view, is just to keep doubling down on the planning to get ahead so that we're ready to respond to things as quickly as we can. With the Ambassador Bridge, our companies lost hundreds of millions of dollars because of that pinch point being too narrow. So we need to double it up and fix that infrastructure, and there's work being done to do that. But the blessing that we have in North America is in the auto sector, our second biggest industry in Canada, is that it's integrated with North America. We can sell to a market 10 times the size of ours. That integration is critical, and so alignment and doing it together with the United States is what gives us that enormous economic advantage for all of Canada.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Mr. Adams or Mr. Kingston, we often speak of supply chain disruptions affecting Canada's reputation as a reliable commercial partner. Have you felt that in your sectors as key members of those sectors? And do you have any direct evidence of this sort of effect on Canada's reputation? I'm sorry, Mr. Iacono.
Has been called. If there are no objections, we can continue perhaps for a line of questioning for the next 5 minutes, perhaps 10 minutes. Are there any objections to that? Seeing none, please continue, Mr. Iacono.
J'ai posé ma question.
I've put my question. With Mr. Adams, did you understand the question, sir?
Did. Thanks very much for the question. Appreciate it. I think I would reiterate some of the comments that have already been made by Mr. Patterson and Mr. Kingston just around the Ambassador Bridge in particular. Obviously, that caused a great degree of disruption in terms of having I think all of the 5 manufacturers in the Ontario region be shut down for a period of time, as well as vehicle manufacturers in the United States as well. So this closure came to the radar screen of the President of the United States as well. So it was an issue that was front and center for a period of time. And I think both provincial and federal officials had to spend a great deal of time to reassure officials in the United States that this was a very infrequent incident, and we're taking measures now to ensure that it doesn't happen again. But it is a concern for sure.
Merci, Monsieur Adams. Monsieur Kingston.
Thank you, Mr. Adams.
Much, Mr. Adams. Prochainement, nous avons Monsieur Barcelou-Duval.
And now we'll have Mr. Barcelou-Duval. You have 2.5 minutes. The floor is yours. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is addressed to Mr. Kingston. A little earlier, I asked you what we could do to give you more ways to ensure that more electric vehicles find their way to dealership lots, and you said more demand is needed. So, recently, I got in touch with 2 different companies to try to buy an electrical vehicle. I wanted one. I was ready to go try one, even buy one, and so on. But I was told by 2 different companies, no, we're not taking any more orders for electric vehicles. We're unable to. We've got enough. There are vehicles for which the price hasn't even been announced that have told us that they've maxed out on sales. So I have a lot of difficulty understanding that. You know, look on TV. What do you see? Ads. Just, EV ads. That's pretty much all we see these days as ads. So you call people up and, hey, there's none available. So I'm trying to see, if there's no electric vehicle, obviously you'll go buy something else because you need a car, and there won't be any demand indeed. So am I just out in left field or what? And what can we do to ensure that dealerships have EVs out on the floor?
Yes, thank you for the question. A couple of things to note. First of all, when you look at the overall fleet, we're only 0.2% of all vehicles are electric. Sales last year were 5.6%. So yes, we are seeing an increased interest because of all of the new vehicles automakers are bringing to the market, but we are far, far off from widespread adoption and acceptance. If you look at the average transaction price of electric vehicles, they are significantly higher than a gas-powered vehicle. So we need to do more to make this transition work for everybody. And we're very, very, very far from being, even a 20% adoption level is going to be a big climb without incentives that work for all Canadians and more.
Juste une dernière question.
Just one last question, if I may. So you're asking for higher backing for electric vehicles, but you're not providing more of an offer. So why are you asking for that if there's not even an offer or a supply?
In a temporary interim supply challenge driven by global forces that are not in Canada's control, namely a semiconductor shortage. So that, again, regulating sales in an environment where we have not achieved pre-COVID production levels will not resolve inventory issues. That has to work through. That is temporary, it's transitory, and you will see an increase in vehicle inventories once production returns to pre-COVID levels. That's
Thank you very much,
and at
Mr.
that
Kingston.
point, we have to boost demand.
Merci beaucoup, Mr. Barcelou-Duval. Mr. Bachrach, the floor is yours. You have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Say it's frustrating to hear the reluctance on the part of the auto manufacturers, and I sincerely hope that this federal government follows through on its promise to bring in mandates for production and get those vehicles onto lots so people can buy them. But I wanted to direct my next questions to Mr. Miller, who's been sitting here patiently listening to all this testimony and about electric vehicles. Probably not super relevant to the Port of Vancouver, although I know it is a major gateway for vehicles, both that are imported and exported. But my question is around the Roberts Bank T2 expansion. Now, this is a very controversial expansion in the estuary of British Columbia's most significant wild salmon river. There was a proposal for industrial development in the estuary of the Skeena River, which is the second biggest wild salmon river in BC, that also saw widespread opposition. In the case of the Fraser, we've already seen 70% of the estuary impacted by industrialization. We have major problems when it comes to killer whales, when it comes to wild salmon, all of these things. And I understand that scientists have come out with very serious concerns about this expansion. Now, the port has promised to offset the impact on habitat by building new habitat elsewhere. But we know that this approach is very problematic. In fact, a 2016 study came out and said that other initiatives to offset habitat loss in the Fraser estuary, only 30% of those initiatives functioned ecologically over time. And even in those examples, the number of native species had declined significantly. So my question is, in light of this, how are we to trust that the plan that the port has put forward for this expansion will not result in serious impacts on things like migratory birds and shorebirds, killer whales, Chinook salmon, and the other species that have been highlighted, given the situation we're in that vital ecosystem?
The panel that reviewed the project and reviewed the science was quite positive that in fact with the proper conditions that in fact this project could go ahead without causing that sort of damage. And the most recent intervention by the Department of Fisheries and Oceans indicated that they were now comfortable that in terms of killer whales, in terms of salmon, that the approach we're taking and the conditions that are there are sufficient to enable us to proceed with the project without the sort of risk that you're talking about. We have quite a long history as well in terms of building new habitat. We have quite a long history of that, and generally speaking, have been quite successful at it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miller, and thank you very much, Mr. Bachrach. Next, we have Mr. Genereux, who's been patiently waiting. Before I pass the floor over to him, though, I would just like to say, Mr. Kingston, I know that you have a hard stop. We appreciate your presence here today, and on behalf of the committee, we thank you very much. So, Mr. Genereux, the floor is now yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And shoot, all my questions were going to Mr. Kingston, so I'll change it on the fly here, I guess. To Mr. Patterson, you kind of talked a little bit about what I was going to ask Mr. Kingston about. He spoke a bit about a federal lead on what the supply chain would look like. I'm just curious if you have any insight on that, being perhaps one of his members, but also some of the comments that you made about impacts at the border. I was hoping you could just share what you know, what those real stories are, like not necessarily from the shipping perspective, but he was looking for increased border staff and what the situation is now, and just again hoping I see Mr. Adams also can probably chime in on some of that too.
I'll just very quickly. I mean, I think Brian is very correct. Is that we need to be anticipating. Have clear leadership in different areas, and these issues are complex. It comes down to issues of drivers maxing out their time when they do get in a hold-up situation. We need infrastructure like the Gordie Howe Bridge. We need to make sure that we've got the support to our amazing border crossing people. And I'll tell you, the solutions that they helped us put together to get vehicles across the border when it was blocked, they're my heroes. They're incredible. What they need, they just need our support. And we need to just really make sure that we continue to align some of the world's best customs planning processes for high volume industries like automotive. So we have the toolkit. We have very smart people. I think we just need to keep aligned between jurisdictions, and make sure, as the junior partner in the auto sector, as 1/10 of it, that we take the initiative to make sure that we're on the front foot and ensuring that we don't have holdups.
And maybe I'll throw it over to Mr. Adams too to comment. But like, what does that look like then? Is that like just more CBSA officers at the border? Is it a better streamlining of what's happening now? I guess kind of some examples would be helpful for the committee.
Maybe if I could chime in, I think part of it is just pre-clearance activities is always a good one. Ensuring that we know what is coming to the border before it actually gets there helps it move through the border quicker. So that would be one activity that deserves maybe some more focus than it's had to date. And you're right. I mean, increased personnel at the border is essential. I think you were talking about the supply chain generally as well, Mr. Generou, and I think part of that does come down to, at least on a freight transportation effort, it comes down to what David suggested, that there's a shortage of drivers right now. Everybody is struggling for drivers to move product, whatever that product might be. So we're in a constant battle to ensure that we have the drivers to move the goods across from the ports into the interior of the country.
Good. And Mr. Chair, I'm good. I'll cede the rest of my time back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Generou. And on behalf of the entire committee, I would like to thank our witnesses for their testimony today. With that, this meeting is adjourned.